Alright guys, good morning everybody. It is that time when my wife tells me you don't have to start on time every time. That's the time it is. Alright, welcome back everybody. We have our summary from last time. That was Exodus 4:18 to 5:9. Title was, Moses returns to Egypt with Aaron, convinces the Hebrews with the signs, and fails at their first meeting with Pharaoh. The summary was, Moses asks Jethro for approval to go back to Egypt. They take the donkey express to Egypt with the family. God instructed Moses again on what to say. God tells Moses he will harden Pharaoh's heart. Field surgery creates the bridegroom of blood. Moses and Aaron are reunited. Moses and Aaron speak to the elders and the Hebrews. They went to see Pharaoh and butchered God's instructions. And Pharaoh says, "Who is this Yahweh?" And he orders no straw be given for brickmaking. That one is going in the bucket. Okay. And the title we had for this week's summary came from James. Thank you, James. Exodus 5:10 through 6:9. So if you got your Bible, you can turn to 5:10 because we'll do our summary in a second. And it was, after meeting with Moses, Pharaoh takes away the straw so Israelites cannot make bricks and beats them for it. The Hebrew foremen blame Moses. Moses blames God, and God promises their deliverance. All right, so what happens? Exodus 5:10 to 6:9. What's first?
No straw, but keep your quota.
Yep, that's the taskmasters, right?
It says taskmasters and the foreman.
Yeah. Well, they tell the foreman and the Hebrews, yeah. So, and foreman.
Yeah.
No straw, but keep your quota. I like that. Okay, then what?
Pharaoh said they were just lazy.
Yes. Let's preface that. The foreman complains to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Pharaoh says they're just lazy. Okay? Then what? I'm going to add nobody blames Pharaoh.
Moses goes to the Lord and says, "Why have you done this?"
Moses accuses God of evil. Why have you done this? Very good. And what did God say back? I just erased him off the board a little bit ago.
He said, just wait and see.
Yeah, he said, just wait and see. And he gives 7 eternal promises. So take them out. Maybe take them out could be taken 2 different ways. Take them out of slavery. How about that? Be there, God. How's that look? Thumbs up? Okay. That summary is done. So now, we will pick back up at Exodus 6:10. I'm going to turn there. And as we get into this, I want to revisit that idea that I had shared last week. I might try to bring this up several times as we go. That we're learning about God here. These plagues learn about God, and the purpose of learning about God is to love Him. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good to love God if we don't know who God is, because we don't even know what we're loving. Maybe we're loving the wrong God. And so something that I think we're going to learn through this story and through the rest of the Bible that Hebrews points out, since we're in Hebrews in the service upstairs, hopefully this is not a surprise, was that understand that everybody throughout history who put their trust in the Most High God, in Yahweh. They knew they had these other gods, but that if they put their trust in that there was this other higher God than all the other gods, anybody anywhere in the world did that, they were saved. They were not put to shame. Hebrews tells us that all along it was about faith. It was about trust the whole time. And what Jesus changed when he came was nothing. Nothing was changed by Jesus in that calculus. And that's part of the message of Hebrews, was that it's still about faith. It's about trusting God. What did change was before Jesus died, the people who died went to a place called Sheol, the realm of the dead. And the realm of the dead was not bad or good. It's just where you went. And there were bad parts of the realm of the dead, and there were good parts of the realm of the dead. And the good part of the realm of the dead, paradise, was called Abraham's bosom. We learn that from Jesus in the book of Luke. And so the people who had put their trust in God, and the people who had suffered a lot, went to Abraham's bosom to be in paradise, to rest and wait. But they didn't know what they were waiting for. They were waiting for Jesus to die. Jesus dies and is resurrected, and he defeats death. And now, all those people who trusted God before Jesus came have been saved. Now when we die, we get to go be with Jesus right away. To be dead in the body is to be with the Lord, as Paul says, right? So that's what changed when Jesus came, but all along it was about faith. So the words that we are reading right now was the path to salvation for these people, not because they would follow the law, but because it could lead them to trust in the one true God, no matter what culture they were in, no matter where they were at in the world. Because in all of history, everybody got to choose their God. That's the choice God really gave to all of us in this world. We get to choose whether we're going to be our own God. We get to choose whether to worship demons as God, other spiritual beings that aren't God. We get to choose whether to worship nature as God. Everybody on the planet is making this choice and has made this choice whether they know it or not. Or you can worship the real God, of course. And so you and I should read this in the mindset of the people. We shouldn't forget about Jesus, because that was the whole point of the entire story. It helps us know where we're going. But while we're reading this, I think this will mean a lot more to you, especially as you learn to love Yahweh. That reading this was the way you were supposed to learn to love this God, to escape your regional God, to see the evil around you and the injustice that was around you all the time and say, I don't want this to be the way it is. I want there to be a good God, not just a powerful God that smites us capriciously, right? I want the good God to be there, and that's who I want to follow. And so when we're done reading this, I hope when you say your prayers to this God Yahweh, you thank him for being good. Because how dark would the world have been if the Creator had turned out to not be good? Or to even be kind of good, as some of these gods are. They're kind of good. They do some good things. They don't always do good things. So when you pray to God and say, thank you, God, for being good. Because it didn't have to be that way. He chose to be good. And we benefit from it. So Exodus 6:10. So Yahweh said to Moses, go in and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But Moses said to Yahweh, well, behold, the people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. But Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a charge about the people of Israel and about Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Now, why didn't the people listen to Moses? We just learned it the very verse before that we ended on last time, was that their spirit was broken. The harshness of the slavery and the broken spirit meant they couldn't hear the words of God that Moses was relating to them. But Moses is insecure, and he thinks, it's my fault. If I had just spoken differently, then they would have heard me. But he uses this weird phrase, uncircumcised lips. He didn't use that before when he said he didn't speak well. There's three things that this can mean. The first one, the most obvious of uncircumcised, means the foreskin's still there, right? That there's something in the way between my words and their ears. And it's not getting out of there. And that's used that way in the Bible a few times, like when it says that you have uncircumcised ears or an uncircumcised heart. There's something in the way of you hearing what you're supposed to hear. The other way of interpreting this is, or a second way, is circumcision was the symbol of the promise to Abraham. So that existed here at Moses' time. In fact, Moses hadn't circumcised his kid before, right? That's how we got the bridegroom of blood. And so one way of interpreting this is, my lips aren't following your commands. I'm not adhering to the covenant that you've given me. Because he did screw up when he went to Pharaoh the first time. He's like, I didn't follow your commands. I didn't do what you said. And the third way that it's used in the Bible is that it can just mean unclean or unholy. Like the Gentiles were uncircumcised. It wasn't necessarily that they were bad. It was that they were unholy. And you can see that in, Isaiah doesn't use the word, but when Isaiah has a vision and he stands before the holy God in heaven in his vision, the very first thing he says, we're sort of waiting breathlessly, like what would you say when you first encountered God? A lot of people will say, I'm going to say, why did you make the mosquito? Like, that's what a lot of people think they're going to ask God, but Isaiah says no. He says, woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. The very first thing he said, and he felt so intensely he had to say it, was that he was unclean. He was a sinner. And so that's the third thing that uncircumcised could mean there. So now we're going to jump into another list of names here. So verse 14, these are the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. And we're going to go through, I won't read all the names, but it starts at Reuben and it goes through the sons of Jacob until we hit Levi. And then come under Levi, we then zoom in to verse 20, an important part. It says, Amram took as his wife Jochebed, his father's sister, so his aunt, and she bore him Aaron and Moses, the years of the life of Amram being 137 years. And then we go on to have the sons of another one of the sons of Amram's dad, and then we jump into Aaron's lineage, and then we finish. And so at the end, verse 25, Eleazar, Aaron's son, took as his wife one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. And these are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites by their clan. And so it's the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, and it only takes Aaron's kids. It only takes Aaron and goes through his kids. It doesn't say anything about Moses' kids. This is where we learn the names of Moses' mom and dad. Because remember, when Moses introduced them earlier, they were just a man and woman had a baby. Nothing big. And so that's how we know they're Amram and Jochebed. But Dennis Prager had a really good point in this is his Exodus commentary, that I wanted to read you guys a little short essay about why Moses' kids aren't in here. He says, Aaron's sons are mentioned, but not Moses's. The lack of attention to Moses' sons here, and elsewhere in the Torah, essentially nothing is said about them, needs to be explained. And the explanation is probably this: they did not amount to much. This raises the interesting issue of the difficulty many children of great people face in leading successful and satisfying lives. In a book about Moses, titled Overcoming Life's Disappointments, Rabbi Harold Kushner writes about this. He says, sometimes the father casts so large a shadow that he makes it hard for his children to find the sunshine they need to grow and flourish. Sometimes the father's achievements are so intimidating that the child just gives up any hope of equaling him. But mostly, I suspect, it takes so much of the man's or the father's time and energy to be a great man, great in some ways but not all, that he has too little time left to be a father. As the South African leader Nelson Mandela's daughter was quoted as saying to him, "You are the father of all our people, but you never had time to be a father to me." Kushner relates a remarkable story he read in a magazine geared toward clergy, a fictional account of a pastor in a mid-sized church who had a dream one night in which a voice said to him, "There are 50 teenagers in your church, and you have the ability to lead 49 of them to God and lose out on only one." Energized by the dream, the minister throws all his energy into youth work, organizing special classes and trips for the church's teens. He eventually develops a national reputation in his denomination for his work with young people. And then one night, he discovers his 16-year-old son has been arrested for dealing drugs. The boy turned bitterly against the church and its teachings, resenting his father for having had time for every 16-year-old in town except him. And the father never noticed. His son was the 50th teenager, the one who got away. Of course, this was not necessarily true of Moses' children, but the silence of the Torah concerning his children, which is not the case with the children of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Aaron, serves as an important reminder to parents who have achieved success to be sure to make time for their children. They need to try to ensure their children feel they occupy a special place in their parents' hearts, and no matter how pressing the parents' responsibilities, he or she will always find time for them. I thought that was pretty powerful. About a seemingly innocuous thing you probably wouldn't have even noticed by then, because you would have been bored reading the names and not even noticed that Moses' kids weren't there. I think it's right. So verse 26, these are the Aaron and Moses. These are the Aaron and Moses to whom Yahweh said, bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their hosts. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing out the people of Israel from Egypt. This Moses and this Aaron. On the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, Yahweh said to Moses, I am Yahweh. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. How will Pharaoh listen to me? Now he just said that not that long ago. So remember I pointed out before that when you see repetition in the text, it's probably one of these literary devices working, right? So we just had that question before. Then we go into the genealogy of Moses and Aaron that we learn in this verse. Why did we have that? It's to prove their credentials. It's to say, it's this Moses and this Aaron. Here's their genealogy all the way back to Jacob, which goes to Isaac and to Abraham. They are one of us. They didn't come from somewhere else. It's sort of like giving their last name, but the last name of their parents and the last names of their parents and the last names of their parents to say, these guys are legit Hebrews. They've got street cred. These are the ones that are doing this. They're not another. And the end of that little aside is a repeat of what came at the beginning. The beginning of it was, I'm of uncircumcised lips, and we see it again at the end to say, I'm now done with the aside. The inclusio has happened, and now we're ready to move on. So that's all that's really about. So, Exodus 7. And Yahweh said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my hosts, my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. The Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the people of Israel from among them. Now that phrase, we're going to see it a lot, I am Yahweh. It sounds like he's repeating his name. I am, he is, right? Like, I am Yahweh. The reason is, remember I told you there actually is no Hebrew word for I am, right? When you say I am in Hebrew or Chinese or Russian or whatever, you just say the word I. So we translate it here as I am, but you can say in your head, Ani Yahweh, I Yahweh. That's all he's actually saying. We just see I am Yahweh. So I don't know about you guys, but that always confused me. He keeps saying I am and then Yahweh again. But which one is it? So he's saying I Yahweh. I am, he is. So that's what he's saying there. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as Yahweh commanded them. And now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, prove yourselves by working a miracle, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and cast it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as Yahweh commanded. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and they, the magicians of Egypt, also did the same by their secret arts. For each man cast down his staff and they became serpents. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as Yahweh had said. So, Paul tells us in 2 Timothy the names of the two magicians here. They were Jannes and Jambres. It's not recorded here in the text, but it does appear to be in some other extra-biblical literature that Paul was familiar with. And so by him telling us it was Jannes and Jambres, that means that it was Jannes and Jambres, even though we don't always trust extra-biblical literature. But the picture here, remember, these are two 80-year-old men, 80, 83. They have the staff because they're leaning on it. Coming into the 27-year-old Pharaoh, who's at the peak of his power and thinks he knows absolutely everything. And I wonder how they even got in there. They failed so miserably the first time. It's almost as if Pharaoh was like, yeah, I could use a good laugh today. Like, we'll let those guys come on back in. Come on back in, guys, grumpy old men. But this time, God got involved. And the Machiavellian Pharaoh didn't know what to do. So we talked before that the snake itself is the symbol of Pharaoh's power. It's from the snake, the goddess Wadjet, that the Pharaoh gets his power to rule. And so, in this scene, Pharaoh's priests create that symbol of power, the Nahash. That's the word used in the Hebrew. That they create these Nahash, these snakes. But Yahweh's power is greater than Pharaoh's power, and Yahweh's snake eats Pharaoh's snake. And since Pharaoh doesn't say anything, we can just read past that like it wasn't that big of a deal. But recognize the symbolism that is dripping out of this story. Pharaoh's power, he comes in and creates that. God's power, Yahweh's power, does not derive from snakes. It does not derive from Wadjet. He's completely outside of this, and he comes into Pharaoh's own turf and creates a snake that is the source of Pharaoh's power, and that snake eats the source of Pharaoh's power before his very eyes, and then Moses grabs it and it turns into a harmless stick right in front of him. And so while the Pharaoh, wearing his cobra headdress, and he's so proud of himself, he doesn't know what to say, and he just has a hardened heart, and they leave. Right? There is an interesting play here that we do not see in English, and it fascinates me ever since I first learned about it from a guy named Gerald Schroeder. So if we go back into the text, when it says that Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants at verse 10, and it became a serpent, the word there is not the word used for what the magician's staffs became. The magician's staffs became Nahash. All of the previous mentions of this miracle throughout the text has been Nahash. In this one instance, Aaron's staff became a tanin. And so, tanin is the exact same word for what God created in the seas on day 5 of creation. So in Genesis 1, day 5 of creation, in fact, let's just turn there. Genesis 1. Let's go to day 5. So that would be verse 20. Yeah, verse 20. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. So great sea creatures, right here, is the word tanin. The Septuagint, remember that really old Greek translation that we have that a lot of our translation relies on? They used the Greek word for whales. So do you think that that Aaron's staff turned into a whale in Pharaoh's court? It does not appear that way, right? It did not become a whale. So if you look at what does the word tanin actually mean, ignore what Genesis 5 says, because the Septuagint translators, it carries this sense of bigness, okay? And we're talking about the sea, so they're thinking, I need to translate some big creature in the sea. The biggest creature we know of is the whale. we stick whale in there. But that's not what tanin means anywhere else in the Bible. It means the class of things that a snake comes from. So that's why we translate it as serpent. What do we call the class of animals that a snake belongs to?
Reptile.
A reptile. A tanin is a reptile, but it's not just any reptile. It's a great and terrible reptile. That's why when Aaron's staff becomes that, it's like the one up. It wasn't just the snake reptile. It was the great and terrible reptile. And so the Greek word for great and terrible is dino, or dino, and the Greek word for reptiles is saurus. And so had the Septuagint translated it correctly, in Genesis 1, it would have said on the fifth day God created the dinosaurs in the sea and the birds. But they changed their translation under Pharaoh's side back to serpent, back to reptile, great and terrible reptile. So I think the Bible does say God created dinosaurs, and that's why. But they don't translate it that way, because our oldest translation, the Septuagint, said whales. So we hang on to this relationship to whales as great sea creatures. I just find that fascinating. But his did become a greater serpent. Now the commentators, they we don't really know what it was. They say it was a crocodile. Crocodile ate the snake because there was a crocodile god in Egypt, so it could have been that. But I don't think so. I think it was just this great, terrible serpent that we should have called a dinosaur. Crocodile is kind of a dinosaur anyway, so maybe it was. Anyway, so moving on. We are about to start the plagues. So verse 14 starts the plagues. I think it's worth a little introduction because the plagues just kind of rapid fire come at you as you go through this story, and there's so much depth to them that if you don't have some framework to read them, you just can't sort them out in your head. They're all jumbled together. So the first thing to understand is that the plagues have a triadic structure. They come in threes. So plague number 1, 4, and 7. Moses is instructed in each of those plagues to go and meet Pharaoh where he's at in the morning. Meet Pharaoh in the morning where he is. And then the second in each of the triads is 2, 5, and 8. And in each of these, they are instructed to go to the palace. And the last set of 3, the 3, 6, and 9, the killing of the firstborn is its own plague, off by itself. These all come with no warning. So this is the structure. We get a repeating 3 of meet Pharaoh where he is, then go to the palace, then just do the thing and don't tell anybody. It's just going to happen. The first 3 plagues all have to do with the environment. They are the Nile turning into blood, the land turning into the dust of the land turning into gnats. What was
Flies.
Was flies 4? Why am I blanking on this right now?
Flies is 4.
The flies was 4, right? The frogs. Yeah, the frogs.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't write frogs down. It's the Nile turning to blood, then the frogs, and then the gnats turning into dust. That's what. The next 3 are all animals and humans. And so those 3 are the flies / scarab beetles, the livestock dying, and the boils coming on all of the people. And then the last 3, the culmination, we just escalate as we go. These are cosmic heavens and earth. And so these are hail, just destroys everything from the heavens. There's fire coming down. The locusts completely destroy everything in the land. And then there's full darkness, like we don't even have light. There's darkness you can feel. So this is the structure of the plagues that we're going to be reading through, and that we will get some help in understanding the story through that. But the biggest thing to help understand the story is to understand the context that these people had when they were writing it down that we don't have today, and that is the Egyptian pantheon of gods. And so there's the last thing I read, there was about 124 known Egyptian pantheon of gods, so this is going to take us a few weeks. but we should. No, I'm not going to do all 124 gods. I'm just going to do the gods that are relevant to the plagues. Okay? I'm not doing this to tell you you should worship these gods. I am not doing this to tell you that this battle was ever in question, but it's to understand this was the soul of these people. Okay? And if you don't know these gods, you don't fully appreciate what's going on for these guys. Okay? So the first one. Well, actually, I should start by saying the stories of the gods change a lot over the thousands of years of the Egyptian dominance. And so the story, I've pieced together, I think, a coherent story. They didn't care about coherence. It didn't always make sense. So I put together the most coherent story I can of these gods. But it changed over the years. Regions had their own slight differences, just like we have different denominations in Christianity. They had their own slight differences of the gods. And what we don't appreciate in Western culture is they really like syncretism, if you've ever heard that word. Syncretism is the merging of religions. It's where we as Christians would try to say that the Hindu religion is also true. It's just Yahweh's over them. You know, that syncretizes our religions. And so they would often combine gods, especially to resolve regional differences. And you're just like, well, they're just both the same God. So we don't have just Ra, the sun god. We have Amun-Ra, which was the Theban god Amun he was the mysterious god, and he gets merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, the ultimate god of everything. And so he's our first god. If you've ever studied Hinduism and tried to understand their pantheon of gods, it feels exactly like this. I've been doing this for 3 weeks, and it is exactly like studying the Hindu gods. You just can't pin them down on anything. There's always this one more god that's always above all the other gods, and it's confusing. First god, Ra. Ra is the sun god. Ra emerged from the primordial waters of chaos that they called Nun. And Ra is the king of all the gods. He's number one. He's self-created. And by the time of the Exodus, they had merged him with Amun. And so Amun-Ra was the main god that they were worshiping as the king of all the gods. Amun-Ra. Then Ra doesn't have anybody else around to create babies with, so he just creates his descendants directly. The first two he creates are Shu. Actually, I'm going to write it this way. It'll be kind of like a family tree. So Ra creates Shu, which is the god of air, and Tefnut, which was the god of rain or dew. And Shu and Tefnut have a baby. They have two babies. Named Geb. He's the god of earth. And Nut is the god of the sky, goddess of the sky. So, the myth goes that when they were first created from Ra, Nut, this goddess, and Geb, the god of the earth and the god of the sky, were so tightly conjoined in an embrace that there was no space between them. And Shu, their father, didn't think that was good, so he got between them, this is Shu, and pushed up Nut into an arch of the sky over the earth. And so Shu is the god of air, sitting in between the goddess of the sky and the god of earth, Geb. So like when the dust of the earth becomes gnats, this is Geb. Right? When hail falls out of the sky, this is Nut. So, Geb and Nut have some kids. 4 important ones. First most important one, the first one was Isis. Isis was a goddess, and she was the goddess of healing and magic. That will become important. Next was Osiris. Osiris was the god of agriculture originally. And he was the rightful king of Egypt. And he was a benevolent king of Egypt, and he was married to his sister Isis. And so everybody loved Osiris, except his younger brother Set. He's the god of storms and chaos. And there was a fourth one named Nephthys, but she doesn't come into this story at all. And so Set is very jealous of his older brother Osiris, who is the great benevolent king of Egypt that everybody loves. So Set murders Osiris and throws his coffin in the Nile River. The coffin washes up on shore, and a tamarisk tree grows around it, and nobody can find the body of Osiris anymore. And his grieving wife, Isis, looks all over the earth for it. Finally, one of the humans cuts down the beautiful tamarisk tree to build a pillar for his palace, and they find the coffin of Osiris in the tree. Isis learns of it, grabs Osiris' body out of the coffin, and hides it in the marshes. Set hears about that, goes and finds the body in the marshes and cuts it into 14 pieces so that she can't keep his body, and throws them all in the Nile River. And then from the Nile River they are dispersed and lost across all of Egypt. So Isis gathers her siblings and a few other gods together, and they go on this quest across the entire earth to try to find the body parts of Osiris. They finally find them all except one. The only thing Isis wants from Osiris is to have a child, and the one part they couldn't find was the part she needed him to have a child. If you can use your imagination. So she just fashioned one out of, depending on the narrative, gold or wood, and then she uses her magic, this is why she's the goddess of healing and magic, to resurrect Osiris temporarily so that they can get pregnant, and she has Horus, her son. But her magic isn't strong enough to keep Osiris alive forever, and so Osiris shortly after that dies, and again goes to the underworld, and his dad Geb is so impressed with Osiris's morality and greatness that he gives him control of the entire underworld and afterlife. So Osiris is king of the afterlife, and he lives in the field of reeds, which is like Abraham's bosom we were talking about before. It's paradise. And so Osiris was one of the most important gods to all of the Egyptians because he is who they aspired to be. They wanted to be the God who lived a moral life and earned his path to salvation, to live in the field of reeds where they would be resurrected like Osiris was. And so they earned their salvation by being a good and moral person like Osiris. And the reason he is so important to this narrative is the Nile is considered to be Osiris's very bloodstream. It is Osiris's blood. And so to attack the Nile means attacking the god every Egyptian aspired to be. This was a big deal. And so Isis and Osiris have Horus. Now, I recommend you write these down because as we go back through them, I'm going to have some pictures for as we go through the plagues. You'll see these guys again, but hopefully then they'll click a bell will go off and you'll remember when we went through this. Isis and Osiris have Horus. You may have heard of the god Horus before. He's kind of famous. The reason he's famous is that Horus sets out in a series of battles against his uncle Set. Because his uncle Set was like Scar in the movie The Lion King. He had killed his older brother, and he was now king, but he was a bad king, and Horus fights him in these set of epic battles to become king, and he eventually becomes the rightful king of Egypt. He's a good king, and every pharaoh that came after that was considered to be a descendant of Horus, and the current pharaoh was always considered to be the instantiation, the incarnation of Horus on earth. And so they were considered to be the god Horus while they were alive. And when they died, they were one of his descendants. And so that's why Horus is important. And in one of the battles with Set, Set had gouged out Horus's eye, his right eye. And his right ie represented the sun, and his left eye represented the moon. That's what they thought. Was his right eye was sun, left eye moon. And his mom Isis magically heals his eye to come back. And so that eye of Horus becomes one of the biggest symbols in all of Egyptian mythology. It goes on all their amulets, it goes on their coffins, it goes on everything. It's the symbol of protection and healing, the eye of Horus is. So it's everywhere. Because his eye was the sun, he's very closely related to Ra. So they create a syncretism of Ra and Horus called Ra Horakti, this god with the head of a falcon. And he is the sun from horizon to horizon. Horus becomes the two horizons, and Ra is still the god of the sun itself. Let's see. Next up, we start stepping a little bit out. So that's called the Heliopolis tradition from the Aeneid. We step outside of that a little bit into a set of other gods that we don't always have their origin stories, but we know what they were the god of. So the first one is Khnum. Khnum was the creator of humanity. And he is considered to be the source of the Nile. He fashioned humans out of clay from the Nile on his potter's wheel. So he's the potter's god. He's married to Hecate, his wife. She's the frog-headed goddess. And she breathes the breath of life into the clay figurine that Khnum had made on his potter's wheel, and that's when humans actually became alive. And so she became the goddess of childbirth and midwives. And so Khnum, his origin story is he's self-created like Ra. He didn't necessarily come from Ra. That's the best we've got so far. Hecate's origin story is completely lost. Some people think she might have been a daughter of Ra. Don't know. I personally just think the demons were making these stories all up. That's why so many of them conflict. And just telling the humans, and
What? It doesn't, like, it has to be, right? Like, you think about it, it's like, who comes up with this stuff?
exactly. Who would come up with it? I agree with you. It had to be demons. They give these guys spiritual experiences, so they feel like it must be true, because I got it from the spirit world, and they're just creating these weird stories.
And it's kind of the same thing with, like, the Bible story as well. Like, all the things in there, we talk a lot about, like, stuff they wouldn't put in there if they wanted it to be true, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like the origin story, like, it is God's word. Like, people just can't come up with this stuff.
Yeah, I do.
So
agree
on
with that.
both sides.
Yeah, on both sides. Well, I do. That's why I don't think the first guy that was trying to make this and write it out. How did he get any followers? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Anyways, it's in every culture everywhere until this book comes onto the scene. So to me, there's something to it. But I don't necessarily think these actual gods existed. They were probably just the creations of the demons to get the humans to do what they wanted. But that's just me guessing. So next up is Hapi. Hapi is this androgynous god. He's considered a god, but he's depicted with female and male traits. And he is the god of abundance and prosperity. And he is the annual flooding of the Nile. So preceding the annual flooding of the Nile every year, preceding Hapi coming, is a whole bunch of frogs show up in the land before the Nile actually floods. So they're somewhat related in that way. But every year when that Nile floods, and that is the source of Egypt's prosperity, that's the god Hapi, every time. We also have lost his origin story. 2 more to go. Renenutet. Renenutet. This is the goddess. She's a cobra-headed goddess. Goddess of protecting the harvest. Specifically protecting the harvest. Both when it's in the field, when it's being harvested, and when it's in storage. They would pray to the goddess Renenutet. Sorry. So when the locusts come and destroy all the plants and all the vegetation, all the harvest that's ready disappears, the people there are crying out to Renenutet, why didn't you save us from Yahweh? And the last one, my favorite god, although he's the hardest to look at, Khepri. He has the head of a scarab beetle. You ever seen those things, those big beetles in Egypt that have like the big pinchers on the front? They're called a dung beetle. Have you ever seen the pictures of the beetles that roll the balls of poop around?
Yeah.
So they roll the balls of poop around, that's where they lay their eggs. And so, to someone who didn't see them lay their eggs and then roll the ball all over the place, the scarab beetle seems to bring life from non-life. It seems to take a ball of poop, and one day, baby scarabs just appeared out of it. So he became the god of rebirth and creation, the creation of life. And most importantly, his job is to roll the ball of the sun across the sky every day like the scarab beetle rolls the ball of dung across the floor of the desert. And so he got syncretized with Ra as well into Ra Kepri, that they're together. The reason the sun goes across the sky every day is Kepri, the scarab beetle god, is rolling it across like the beetles are rolling the poop. So I feel like the demons were laughing when they came up with that one, because they were like, you're all worshiping God, and now we're going to tell you like the sun that you're worshiping is a big ball of poop. Like, anyways, this is as much background as I thought anybody could stand as we head into the plagues, all right? So we'll start with the first one, and then we'll wrap it up with there. So here you go. I spent quite some time trying to get the AI to create photorealistic pictures of what it would have actually been like during these plagues. So here's the best example I could get of what the Nile turning to blood might look like with all the dead fish. It would not smell good. The blood would be drying up on the pots. It would be turning black. It'd just be gross. Not a good morning for those people. So, chapter 7, verse 14, then Yahweh said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water. Stand on the bank of the Nile to meet him, and take in your hand the staff that turned into a serpent. And you shall say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But so far you have not obeyed. Thus says Yahweh, by this you shall know that I am Yahweh, Ani Yahweh. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it shall turn into blood. The fish in the Nile shall die, and the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will grow weary of drinking the water from the Nile. And Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, their canals, and their ponds, and all their pools of water, so that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, he lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile turned into blood. And the fish in the Nile died, and the Nile stank, so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. There was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them, as Yahweh had said. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not even take this to heart. And all the Egyptians dug along the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the Nile. 7 full days passed after Yahweh had struck the Nile. So first off, I think this is a fitting first plague to punish the people who threw all of the Hebrew babies into the river. There was a lot of blood that day, and their whole river turned to blood. So the gods that we have relating to this one, we got Khnum, that was the source of the Nile we just talked about. We got Hapi, the annual flooding of the Nile. And we have Osiris, who was this was his literal bloodstream, the Nile itself. So what that means is they couldn't drink the water. When they tried to, they got sick or died. And there's a huge fractal here with Jesus. That when you drank the blood of Osiris, the Egyptian version of a dying and rising god, you died. And you got sick, and you couldn't stand it. But when you drink the blood of Jesus, 1,400 years in the future, as we do communion, the living water has been turned into blood. And not only does it not kill you, it saves you. And not only does it not stain, like this blood stains everything it touches. Jesus' blood washes your clothes whiter than the whitest linen that you've ever seen. There's a huge fractal between Osiris' bloodstream and Jesus' blood. I'm going to skip over that. So I want you to just picture this for a minute, okay? We have this. This has just happened. This is standing in front of you, okay? Pharaoh's standing there. He's surprised, clearly. He's probably trying not to show it because Moses is standing there. And the priests see this happen. They're standing behind him, right? The priests are standing there, and they see the Nile turn to blood. And Jonas turns to John Brace. He starts getting excited. He's like, John Brace, I was just reading a spell about this the other day. I was just reading about a spell that could turn water into blood. Let's go find it. And so Pharaoh sees that Jonas and John Brace are very excited. And he's like, oh, okay. Internally, he's like, we got this. No big deal. My guys are going to take care of this. So Jonas and John Brace go back. They're like, they open up the pots. There's just blood everywhere. They're like, how are we going to do this spell and prove that we can do this? And so they dig beside the Nile, and they get a little bowl of water. And Pharaoh's still standing there with Moses, and they bring the bowl of water up to Pharaoh. Pharaoh sees the clean water in the bowl, and he's like, they cracked the code. They figured out how to do this. Like, we're going to have water again. And that didn't take very long. And so he looks at Moses. He's like, we've got you covered. And they run up. They're really excited. And before he can say anything, John starts waving his hands over the bowl John Brace is holding, and it turns to blood. And then the Pharaoh goes, but he doesn't want to lose face with Moses, right? So he leans over to Jonas, and he's like, wait a minute. So you had clean water, and you just turned it into blood? I have plenty of blood. We don't need any more blood. And he turns back around to Moses, and he's like, well, our God's just as powerful as your God. And then he turns and goes back inside. Like, if you think about it, how dumb was it that they didn't turn the blood back into water? They turned what little water they had into more blood. So, anyways, there is some comedy in the plagues, as bad as they are. But this is our first one. So we'll stop there for today.